Hi everybody, I'm Chelsea T. Hicks, and I am your reader this evening for the third installment of the official issue 60 release party for McSweeney's. Hopefully some of you guys caught Santiago Jose Sanchez last evening. Their work is immediate and addictively paced, and I'm very much enjoying it. Up after the event, the following event after this one, will be Mark Chusano, a widely published writer who has, in this issue, his story deals with mixed race identity and baseball in a very interesting way. So while we're waiting for people to join and roll in, I'll tell you guys a little bit about myself. As I said, I'm Chelsea T. Hicks. I am in the SF Bay Area, where I relocated shortly before the pandemic began from Oklahoma. And I have gotten a job teaching Osage language as of today, which is what I was doing when I was in Oklahoma. But I was really indebted and fortunate to receive aid from PEN America Writers Relief Fund, as well as the American Indian Graduate Center and Institute of American Indian Arts Student Relief Fund. I'm a recent graduate from the Institute of American Indian Arts MFA program, and I am also going to be hosting a reading with other IAIA students on July 30th, if you guys want to hang out later. But this evening, we just get to celebrate issue 60, and I am wearing Urban Native Era because this is an official party and I need designer threads and I can't afford Bethany Yellowtail. And for those of you guys who don't know who Urban Native Era or Bethany Yellowtail is, those are indigenous owned brands, and a lot of times natives just love to wear native clothes made by natives. They'll just be wearing a black t-shirt and they'll be like, this is designed by some Ohloni's. But yeah, so I do want to acknowledge that we're on Ohlone land here in the SF Bay area, and I encourage you guys to know what tribal land you're on wherever you are all around the world. So I also want to share with you that there is a discount going on for subscriptions to McSweeney's. And it's $20 off the subscription, and it begins with issue 60, which is pretty cool because Holly Andres is a photographer who staged scenes from the stories. And so this is the one from my story. And it looks like there's some action going on. I won't spoil it for you guys, but it's a really beautiful issue and well worth the money. And I also want to let you guys know that I am not on Instagram, but I do have some organizations that I wanted to share with you guys that I like to read information from them, and they also communicate through Instagram. So there's I think that this is going to be facing the wrong way. Sorry, guys. So I guess I'll just read it to you. But it'll be spelled like it sounds. So there's It Takes Roots, which is a activism group led by Black and Indigenous and people of color activists, and they do really meaningful and mindful activism. There's an Instagram account called Post Tradish, as in like post-traditional, and they have some women artists, indigenous artists, a lot of them in Oklahoma, who I really admire. And then Urban Native Era, they make clothes, but they also do education and lots of good education on their Instagram account. And they also put on these events in Oakland called Red Markets, but there's a pandemic going on, so have to wait for those. And then just generally for Indigenous news, I like Indian Country Today and CBC Indigenous. So yeah, it's great to see everybody. For the new people rolling in, welcome to the official McSweeney's issue 60 release party. This is the third reading. And yeah, I've told you guys a little bit about myself. I don't know what else I would like to share, except I guess I could tell you that it's on my mind how grateful I am that I've gotten this job teaching Osage. Because, I mean, when I was relocating here, it was for a writing project, and that writing project got suspended due to the coronavirus because it was collaborative in nature with an elder. So I was just so thankful to receive aid from PEN America. And for all the struggling writers out there, I really recommend to you guys to just look for any relief fund you can, because it's super hard times. But yeah, I'll get started reading here in a moment. First, I'd like to introduce myself to you using my language. So, Hawe Wah-Zha-Zhi Woman Ishtanchi Iya Wita Chelsea San Francisco Owadley Wah-Zha-Zhi Abria Ishtanchi Abria Shalagi Eshki Shawani Eshki Sape Eshki Ishbalo. So, hi, my name is Chueroy. I'm from the Gentle Peacemaker Clan, Wah-Zha-Zhi district of the Osage Nation. My Osage name means looking to the eagle. In English, my English name is Chelsea, and I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. My ancestry is mixed between my maternal grandmother is mixed blood Osage. My paternal grandmother is mixed blood Osage. My paternal grandfather is Shawnee, Cherokee, and Irish mixed blood. My maternal grandmother is Cajun and German, and my maternal grandfather is Scottish American. And he is white. So that's me, and I'm going to be reading to you from the first chapter of a novel that I have been working on as my thesis at IAIA. It was also the first short story of a short story collection, so I worked on this novel for it to function modularly, in a modular fashion, and this story is the first chapter of that novel. I hope I'll be done with it soon. And I'd like to encourage you guys to ask questions throughout and as I finish, and I will answer those. And as I mentioned earlier, since I don't have an Instagram account, this is kind of an adventure for me, but hopefully I'll be able to follow those questions and whatnot. Okay. A fresh start ruined. The Monday after Marie married her boss, she went into his office and told him supper would be ready at 6. Sales reports? He asked. She hesitated, the skirt of her dress swishing nylons. Done. One more thing. Jim hung a cigarette from his lips and tapped the corner of his mouth. Marie kissed him the way he liked, lips extra soft, no spit, then slid the keys off his desk. He said nothing, so she bit the smile from her cheeks and walked out of the office. No one ever drove Jim's Pontiac. But here she was, stepping into the parking lot an hour earlier than usual, tracing the creamy paint job, her new diamond ring reflecting sun off the hip bone curves of the hood. Her eldest son and his wife would be envious when they saw the car tonight. Meeting a new daughter-in-law on their own first night home as newlyweds was not ideal. But nothing about Marie's life was ideal except for Jim. She rolled the windows down like she didn't care and drove home to check on her 7-year-old. He was supposed to come straight back after school. No more roaming the neighborhood, what with dirt-caked elbows and baseball bruises. This was Jim's new rule. Delivered the same easy way he told her he'd lie and tell the county clerk he was Cherokee if they so much as eyed her funny. At Johnstone Avenue, she braked for the light and a teen boy clacked up behind her with the gusto of a horse cop. He walked by, swinging his hips in gabardine and dress shoes, pounding the sidewalk with a sound like doll-sized gunshots. His gait reminded Marie of her first son's father. The light went green, and her thoughts moved away from her and seemed to occur on the windshield. An ache grew between her shoulder blades, the ghost of all her past and future selves. There was no one behind her, so she changed lame pumps for loafers, took 3 aspirin, and sped away from the sense of unreality that was meant to stay on the before side of the marriage. A white owl flew from a tall cedar and floated low over the lawns where sprinklers stuttered into tiny rainbows. She reached her dingy limestone, where the bike-free yard confirmed her latchkey kid was out. She went directly next door to ask the redhead nurse if she'd seen her son. The door opened on the 5th knock, and the neighbor shook her head no. David John wasn't in the living room trading stories for pie. No one else even opened their doors. All down the block, women hid behind peepholes, mixed bloods hating her the same as the whites they resembled, each identifying her as Indian divorcee. They saw her and thought of her dates with so many men. Marie What's-Her-Name from the Osage, an outcast in tight clothes and careful makeup. As if their town of Bartlesville wasn't for Osages, old Wah-Zha-Zhi little horse town. She turned onto Osage Avenue and went down that block, knocking with diligence, but still no one opened the door. Maybe this was punishment for turning from Mrs. Groves into Mrs. Hayden in the span of a year. She faced the yellow-blue sunfade and went home to call her ex-husband, Frank. His new wife answered and said they hadn't seen David John since July 4th. Marie thanked the severe lisp of a woman and hung up. At her son's age, she'd had a dead mother, a disappeared father, and an aunt who hit her daily, but she hadn't run away. She went back outside and bellowed her son's name from the porch. Wind blew the flush off her skin. Jim would be home any minute to reduce her to future mother incapable. He wanted a son of his own, badly, and she could see him rationing affection like ice into dinner party glasses. A kiss here, a hand squeeze there. On the 3rd date, he'd said he wanted to make so much money he could pay for a full tomb like Jesus's. Jim said his mother's love was like a mink stole, but Marie knew her love was even better. She felt love like water. It went everywhere, dispersed, evaporated, gathered overhead, until her love flooded everything. Currently, she was in love with her husband's on-time arrivals, combed hair, and steady sales quotas. 6 dates in, she still wouldn't go home with him, because rejection made her more than secretary-flavored candy. Someone needs to oversee all this. That's what he told her when he proposed. It was true. She was full of Pawhuska, as her grandmother called it, know-how, in loving, keeping house, rearing children. She'd have to work harder to make up for being on her second time around, and a missing son on day one could start the fight that would begin the end of the marriage. So I'll stop there. That's one page. But yeah, thanks guys for listening. So there's already some questions, and I'm excited to get to answer those and talk with you guys a little bit. I see Snappy Lens asking, how do you overcome writer's block and find inspiration? And thank you guys for listening. That means a lot. And I also want to say briefly that working with Claire Boyle, the editor of McSweeney's, on this story was a wonderful experience, and it taught me a lot about how publishing is collaborative. So it's something I took away from the gift of being in this issue. So for writer's block, I try to avoid writer's block by turning everything in life into something that can contribute to writing. So to give an example of that, I keep a journaling practice. I participated in Suleika Juad's, I believe I'm saying that right, but I'm not sure. So somebody correct me if you have a better spelling. In her isolation journals. And so I make a point of journaling every day at some point. And I don't necessarily use anything I journaled, but if I find something in there that seemed particularly devious or, I don't know, unsayable, then I take that out and I put it into a note on my phone. And I just try to do whatever I can to access the thoughts in my mind that I'm afraid to think, and actually notice that I thought them and then record them somewhere. And then on top of that, I like watching old movies, like old Italian movies and French films, to just look at the weird stuff in there and the weird details and lift it and then riff on it. And then the only other thing I can do besides that is try to read literally all the time. I mean, geez, I'm sorry I said that. Faux pas. First of all, saying literally, and second of all, exaggerating. But I do read quite a lot. So, yeah, that's my inspiration ideas. Chandra, hi! Chandra from IAIA has a question. Who or where do you find inspiration for your characters and plot lines? That's a good one, Chandra. So I find inspiration from the past and the present. So I have two different things that I'm doing in my writing practice right now. One is I'm fictionalizing a family story, which is this novel I'm working on. It's called Iko, which means grandma in Wah-Zha-Zhi. And it tells a story, a fictionalized version of the story of my grandma's, my Iko's hard time that she had when she went through a series of 3 marriages to men who discouraged her from practicing her culture. And the reason I wanted to write in the past, because I don't really like reading historical fiction. It's not my main attraction in reading, or a main area of interest. I thought it was necessary, though, because when I was in school, I noticed that history books were telling my classmates and I that natives were dead, and I was like, what? And so I thought that, what's the time when people started thinking natives were definitely dead, and when we became pretty invisible? And I'm thinking, that's as soon as colonization begins in the American Indian Relocation Act in the 50s, and natives start leaving their tribal areas, and there's a lot less practicing of culture. So I thought we really need to contribute to the narrative and knowledge and awareness of how the government redirected the native experience. So yeah, I just wanted to start there to set the record straight before I could even talk about myself or do any autofiction. I felt like I need to even show how I came to be. So I do write autobiographical stuff and family-inspired stuff, and I am seeing if I can try to bridge the gap between the fact that I also write a lot of current things about Native, like, young people and dating and that kind of stuff. And if I could just take that into nonfiction, but I'm like, I don't think I can do it. So I'm inspired by my family and myself. What author's books have been the biggest inspirations on your writing? That's from You're in Maya. Good question. Okay, so I think that Therese Marie Myatt had a really big influence in my writing because her book, Heartberries, is so aggressive and brilliant in its ability to show, like, the emotion of the Native experience for women. And I think it just made me realize that I can't be afraid to write anything and everything that I can see is real in my experience or family experiences. So that had a big impact on me. And I also am a big fan of Roxane Gay. I have read everything she wrote except for Bad Feminist, and I'm getting that from the library tomorrow. It's like, why did I not read that? But I got inspired to read that because I'm currently reading Communion by Bell Hooks, and so I want to read more and more feminist work. Anyway, I have been inspired by many other writers because I grew up in a family where my parents encouraged me to read the canon, but I think the only books that I really was vibing with in terms of a level of wanting to emulate them were, I like the emotional closeness to Edith Wharton characters. And I liked the way Henry James was focused on women's sexuality. It's kind of creepy, but at the time I didn't realize that. I was just like, look at these femme ladies. So yeah. Do you ever incorporate dreams into your work in any way? From Smank Smithsman. I do. When I have a dream, which I have an active dream life, so if I have a dream that, I guess anything that would lead me to want to think about it more than 30 seconds after waking up, I will write it down. And I recently wrote a short story called The Oklahoma Ocean, and it's basically like entirely made up of dreams that I had about an ocean or a sea that is fictional that could exist in Oklahoma. So I love incorporating dreams into work, and I hope that you guys do that too. I know that when I was in workshops a bunch at UC Davis and IAIA, I encountered the idea before that, writing... Actually, at IAIA, I never encountered any discouragement from dreams. And my experience at UC Davis was super valuable and great, but in a different way, because I learned ideas of craft as it's thought of in the standard and like dominant publishing culture. So I was taught there that writing about dreams, sort of, you have to be careful because you could just become too inaccessible. But I think that all the writers that I ever had as teachers agreed that you can do anything as long as you can pull it off. And I think it's worth working to make dreams accessible, even if they're initially super crazy, because you gotta have some magic and subconscious in your work. Do you incorporate your language of Osage in your work writing? If so, what role is language within your work? From Nana Shea. I know who you are, and it's great to see you here. I do incorporate Osage in my writing, and the role that it plays is really to show both the loss of culture and the healing element of language. So Osages in the 50s, at least in this work that I read from this evening, would not have known their language. Like, a lot of them wouldn't have, especially mixed bloods. Ishtakhiji, like little bit of white is how you say it. And so at the same time, a lot of Osages of every type of blood quantum experience also wouldn't have known the language because of boarding schools and the colonization encouraging us to, quote, put that away and not speak it. And it was actually illegal to use native language in ceremony until, I believe, 1973. So I'm trying to contribute to, relearning our language by just encouraging that if other Osages read my work and they see that Osages, in my work feel scared about using their language or they don't know it, but that they still hold on to those few words that they know, I think that shows the seed of language learning that we have, and it encourages the growth of that seed. So I think I can be pretty politically minded in my work, but that's just in my thinking, so that I hope it doesn't show on the page, but here I am, totally fessing up about my motives. So half the time wants to know if the owl makes a comeback in chapter 2. The owl doesn't make a comeback in chapter 2, but it does make a comeback. I guess I have to know my work better to know what chapter it's in, but it's in a flashback. And so yes, good note there, it does. So I'm going to scroll up and check for any questions that I've missed. Snappy Lens liked the answer. Thanks, Snappy Lens. Yeah, this is a great experience being in here. Being in this platform to share with you guys. Okay, I'll see if there's any others, but that might be it. So yeah. On July 30th, I will be hosting a reading if you guys are curious to read more Native students and writers' work, and that will be with the Institute of American Indian Arts, featuring the poet Inez Hernandez Avila. She's this amazing teacher she teaches with the contemplative practices of Nahuatl culture and other indigenous philosophical traditions, and she's an amazing teacher, but she was the one who kind of encouraged me to start learning Osage and using it in my work, because she bridges between the Chicana and Chicano community and the Native community in the U.S., and she's Nez Perce and Tejana. So I'm really grateful to get to hear her poetry and host her as she reads with student readers from IAIA who are my peers and classmates and are so amazing. And I'm continuously shocked to learn how many people don't know how many Native writers there are, because many, I think, are familiar with Tommy Orange now, whose work is great. Of course, Louise Erdrich and the work of Sherman Alexie. But now we have Therese Marie Myatt's publishing lots of articles, and her memoir Heartberries, and Natalie Diaz, the poet, Alicia Washuta has a memoir, Melissa Phoebos has... There's so many Native writers. One of my favorites is the poet Tommy Pico. And so I think that it's a good time to be Native. It's always a good time to be Native, right? So, yeah, I think that I just want to encourage everybody to read Native writers and There's so many. I liked Joshua Whitehead's novel that came out, I think, 2 years ago. And another one that I loved was, oh no, I'm forgetting. But he's a Canadian poet, Billy Ray Belcourt, wrote a poetry collection that I thought was mind-blowing. So you guys check out Billy Ray Belcourt for sure. And I think that I will just send the last invite if there's any closing questions, but I want to thank you guys for being here, and make sure to check for the next reading. It will be with Mark Chusano, and all the information's on the Instagram feed. Be sure to check the Instagram story on McSweeney's page, because they will have that link if you want to get the $20 off of a subscription. And I have subscribed to a literary magazine before, even as a student who didn't have much money beyond, some barely able to pay my rent and afford the food with the TA salary. But I think it's worth it, because that book, whatever literary magazine or journal I had subscribed to at one time Plowshares in a Public Space, and now McSweeney's. And I would sometimes buy a McSweeney's at a bookstore. Just whether you're buying an individual one or a subscription, I think that it's really positive for your writing practice, because you can keep it on your coffee table or by your bed, and every time that I feel like angry or super moody but I'm trying to write, I will look at what other people wrote and use it to inspire a spirit of, if they can do it, I can write something. And it just gives you a sense of really current writing. It's like Instagram for writers, because this was published now. It's the news of writing. And so I think it's really good for our practice to read those journals, and I read them every chance I get. So if you guys don't have any money to get it, just go walking around and try to find one in one of those free book libraries, or go to your library and get one there, because it's really cool to read work that's current and see how people are thinking about fiction right now. I guess before I go, I'll nerd out a little bit about one more book that I'm reading. I just started reading Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine Evaristo. It's her 8th novel, and it's written such that the lines have the effect of poetry, and there's formally, some of them work that way in the intro because I'm just beginning it, but it reads at the pace of a novel. So it's mind-blowing on form and technique, and the characters are really strong. So I recommend that. And I started reading that because Roxane Gay had said something nice about it. And otherwise, I know people are into reading activism work right now for education. And so in addition to the books that you may be reading, this is a good one, an Indigenous perspective on activism, called As We Have Always Done. And it's by Leanne Betamasak Simpson. And the subtitle is Indigenous Freedom Through Radical Resistance. So, yeah, we just have to keep reading. Whatever you're doing, read a lot. And, yeah, jump on this opportunity to get $20 off. And hopefully you guys will be able to catch the rest of the reading series as it occurs over the next 2 weeks. So, thank you again. In closing, I'll say loudly Wah-Zha-Zhi. You guys are so great for engaging with literary events and literary writing, and that's good for all of us. It encourages our thinking and our compassion and our empathy. And Lali means good, and Wah-Zha-Zhi good job. So good job to us, and you guys have a great evening. Iwi le da minkshe until next time.